I think we all believe something great will happen in our world, if not in this generation, in a future generation, and that we should come together and at least play our part in moving the world gently but persistently towards a place of loving kindness.
On In Good Faith, we believe that all faith traditions have something to teach us about how God is working in the world and in our lives. So join us to listen, learn, and be amazed. Today on In Good Faith, we have a subject that's both difficult but also so important to deal with, which really gets to the heart of what it means to be a human being with both the good and the bad. I'm Stephen Cap Perry, host of In Good Faith, in studio with producer Ashton Rowan.
Hey, Steve.
Ashton, you brought to us a rabbi who was a first responder at the tragic Sandy Hook shooting. And just on the face of that, it's like, wow, will this be a difficult conversation? But it's actually turned out to be very enlightening.
Yeah, I think so as well. And it is a difficult conversation. It's a difficult topic. It's a difficult event. And I think, though, it's inspiring to see people get through this difficulty and work with this grief, and to see the community and the events and faith that transpired because of it.
So for our listeners, we want them to know we are dealing with the subject of Sandy Hook. We won't be going into any graphic detail about the actual happenings there, except for Rabbi Dr. Shaul Praver, who was called upon to come and help with the parents and walked right into that situation.
Rabbi Shaul Praver was the rabbi in Newtown, Connecticut in 2012 when the Sandy Hook shooting occurred at that local elementary school, Sandy Hook Elementary. And he was one of the local clergy called upon in order to assist as a first responder during this intense, chaotic, and emergency situation.
And he was not prepped for this. We'll hear details of this, but that he was called and told there'd been a shooting, he should head down, and that as clergy, he should go in and find, did he know some of these people, and should he talk to them? And he didn't even, just like everyone there, understand yet the magnitude of what had happened.
And even now it's difficult to understand the magnitude of what happened. And he talks about this and understanding the magnitude of it on a grander scale and a religious scale and a faith scale, and what that means for who God is and who we are.
Just as a reminder, the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting was a massacre that occurred on December 14th, 2012 in Newtown, Connecticut. A 20-year-old white man shot and killed 27 people, 20 of those victims first graders about 6 years old. And as first responders arrived at the school, the killer took his own life. So we wanted to know from the rabbi what he felt and experienced walking into that, unawares of the totality of the incident.
Yes. So that was my longest tenure in the 23 years of my congregational pulpit life. It was a small community synagogue where I was what we call the kolbo, the one that does everything. That is the rabbi, is the cantor, is the teacher, is the principal, the bottle washer, But I like that, and I like the small setup. It was just like a little synagogue on the prairie in a house, and the people were nice. And we had a nice interfaith clergy group that were close before the incident that occurred in Sandy Hook in 2012. The whole event was, of course, shattering and surreal, but it was also unusual and put the microphone in my hand to say things to the world for a while there. Maybe for a year, I would say, where the media wanted to hear from me. I was keenly aware that I was given that opportunity, so I tried to say the right things, and I tried to rise to the occasion. And this ended my full-time pulpit career, but brought me into the field of chaplaincy.
You were described as a first responder to that incident at Sandy Hook. What met you? Were you dealing with parents in sort of a pastoral role?
So it was a Friday morning, and we got the call. I was having a rehearsal in the synagogue, and we were told that there was a shooting. The church secretary called all of the clergy and said, "Get here at once, you're needed." And so we got there. We didn't know what we were walking into. I saw people walking into the firehouse. I didn't know why. And then when I got into the firehouse, I saw teachers and people in my community and neighboring communities that I knew of from the interfaith group that we have. And so I didn't know the full extent of the shooting, and I was in a state of denial myself. I only knew that the psychologist, the principal, were shot and killed. And I wanted that to be the extent of the tragedy. But then when I saw a teacher and I embraced her, she said, he shot all the children. And I actually said, no, only the psychologist and the principal. That's what happens when you're in denial. And I was there for a good half an hour before I flashed on my phone and saw ABC News, 20 children shot, 6 educators. There was also the mother, that would be the 27th, and the shooter himself would be the 28th that died that day. And I didn't know what to do. I was led into another back room where the parents were waiting, and these were the parents who didn't reunite with their children yet. Like, you can't believe that you are the guy that's in that room and you're in this situation. You just can't believe it. And nobody could believe it. The parents couldn't believe it. All of the clergy who were now in the room couldn't believe it, but there we were. So, they, of course, are holding on to every bit of hope. And the room is filled with people that are either hysterical or very glassy-eyed and withdrawn and numb and very unresponsive and really in shock. And you have to be able to be alert and see how you can help. The FBI agent brought me into the room. This is in the firehouse, just down the street from the school, because the school itself is a crime scene. It's being secured at that point in time. And so it's the parents and the siblings also of the students, the first graders, all the relatives that are there. And so the FBI agent just said, go into the room and see if you know someone and talk with them. Really, that's how emergency scenes are. There's not a lot of instructions. And then if you see someone that's alone, even if you don't know them, take the initiative to reach out to them, see if they want to engage with you. So that's what the room looked like. All of the teachers were together. So these are teachers that had now, lost their principal, had lost their other teacher, student teacher, and a psychologist. So they're in a state of shock and mourning as well. And that is the scene that I walked into.
Did you end up knowing someone?
I did. There was a congregant, and unfortunately her son, a twin who I named in the synagogue, and that was Noah Posner. And he unfortunately was one of the children killed that morning.
I'm glad we can hear his name.
Yeah.
What did that experience do to you as far as you going into chaplaincy and as far as what you wanted to accomplish with your efforts?
I felt that it was important to get to the core of what Noah's mother believed about her spiritual beliefs. We sort of all knew what the end was going to be, but you sort of always hold on to hope. And I wanted to find out, what she really believed and if she felt that she would see her son again someday in another spiritual way. And she did have some strong beliefs, but at the same time, she was so broken and so distraught, really deeply lamenting. Basically, you're there for a person in an emergency situation. It's like you're with a person and then the phone rings and it's their mother, and the high emotion, let's say, starts up again because now you have to tell the story again. And that person, your relative that is calling you, is just processing it for the first time themselves. So it's another wave comes, and then you deal with that and you're with them on that.
Wow.
And it happens again and again.
There's always a question that people will ask, how could the evil in the world be able to do this to undeserving people? And it is a fact of life, a fact of our existence. How did this affect your understanding or your faith in a higher power?
To be honest, it throws all of us for a loop. It puzzles all of us. If you believe that God was the protector, God didn't come to work that day, right? If you believe that God is compassionate, where were you, when we needed you? And all of these past experiences where I prayed to God and God answered my prayers, that's all well and good. But there's a finality to this. As a member of the clergy, we're able to interpret things if we don't like the way certain scriptures read. There's another interpretation for that, right? We all do it. Come on, right? We interpret in a way that's helpful for the people that we are pastoring to, rabbiing to. And so that's in the realm of education and interpretation, hermeneutics. But now I'm confronted with a obnoxiously final, grotesque event that happened that I don't have any power to change. This brings you to a level of humility where you are in the realm of you're saying why, and I'm saying I don't know. And it brings you to a realm of ambiguity and not knowing. And really where the chaplain comes in is being able to stay present in that space. A clergy member will come in and see a person that's in distress and could just comfort themselves without even realizing that and saying, oh, you'll meet in heaven someday. Your child is another angel in heaven, or different expressions like this, which sort of absolves or abdicates the spiritual caregiver to stay in that place of ambiguity. It's sort of like the way to check out.
Yeah. And it almost seems to be saying you shouldn't be grieving so much.
Yeah, where's your faith? Right. And so there's not a whole lot of compassion or humility in that, or any depth of understanding. So the impact of this event put me on a collision course with what God is. Of course, I've always searched as being a child born just 15 years after the Holocaust. The theodicy is not a stranger to me. It wasn't the first time, but now it's my skin, or close to my skin in the game. Not really my skin, but close to it. Too close for comfort. So I brought more depth to that whole question. There was a great theologian who was an older man, and he wrote God After the Holocaust, in a generation of God is Dead, Richard Rubinstein. And when I had a chance to speak with him at the Kiddush after the services, I asked him about his theology. And he's now passed on recently. He was very old, way up into his 90s, I believe. And he just turned to me, and he removed his glasses, and he just said, God is the isness of the world. And he just held his gaze. We would like to package God up in a nice little Christmas or Hanukkah package and think that we have it figured out, and what it looks like and what it feels like and the way that God operates. But the truth is, we don't know anything, from the simpleton to the greatest scholar. And that is pretty much what God said to Moses at the burning bush. I don't have a name. You need a name? You need me to give you a name to tell Pharaoh who sent you? All right, so my name is Adonai. I'm the same guy that appeared to Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, but my real name is Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh. I will be what I will be, or I am that I am. This is pretty much what Richard Rubinstein was saying to me when he said, God is the isness of all things. So this led me to more philosophical and theological inquiries as well, and basically to phenomenology, which is just, look, the universe is here. There's no question about it. The phenomenon of existence is here. We know so little about it. Theologians, scientists, the physical, the spiritual, every aspect of it we know so little about. But let's start with the fact that we're here, and the universe in its enormity is actually here. No question about it. We're taking pictures of it. We have proof of the existence of the enormity of millions of universes and other galaxies. It just humbles you, and you come to a place where you realize you know nothing, and that's the place where you actually begin to understand a little something.
You're listening to In Good Faith. We'll be back with more in just a moment. Hi, In Good Faith listeners. Stephen Cap Perry here. I want to let you know about a special treat for you and your family. This starts December 1st, just in time for the Advent season. Our sister podcast, Constant Wonder, will be dropping a short daily episode with an inspiring Christmas theme. It might be a story from nature, art, or the Bible.
Because remember, in the story, the Magi were not Jewish. They were coming from the East, from different traditions. And yet they're being drawn together in this moment of worship. It kind of gives you that hope that maybe there would be this ability for us to cross all the things that divide us and worship and wonder together.
Each episode is just about 10 minutes long, making it easy to bring the Christmas spirit into your life throughout the holidays. Check out the Constant Wonder Advent series starting December 1st on your favorite podcast platform or the BYU Radio app. Welcome back to In Good Faith. I'm chatting today with Rabbi Dr. Shaul Praver about healing and faith. So for just a moment, I'd like to go back to the beginnings of your spiritual life.
I was born in Great Neck, Long Island, to a very Jewishly identified family, but not a particularly religious one. We were faithful at eating lox and bagels on Sundays. We had a little bit of Passover, a little bit of Hanukkah, but besides that, not a whole lot more, but the culture was there. I did have a grandmother, my mother's mother, who was from Vilna, Poland, and she came to the United States in 1906. The whole Lower East Side scene, the creators of chopped liver and schmaltz and all of the kind of iconic Jewish images, and they eked by in the tenements, and they wanted to have prosperity they gained, and I had every opportunity that they would have dreamed of. But the material opportunities sometimes came at the sacrifice of the spiritual heritage, and this spiritual heritage was brought back to my attention by my grandmother, Sarah Marshall, of blessed memory. And my father is a great humanitarian, also an atheist, but a great humanitarian and great human being. But I was hungry for a connection, a deeper connection to my religion. And so my grandmother, when she would come and light candles on Friday night and would cast a magical spell in the home, which my father loved as well. And I wanted to have whatever that was. Like, I'll have what she's having, because it was a beautiful, beautiful thing to behold, this actual tangible spiritual entity that she brought into the home, really like a light, and her face lit up and she smiled and radiated. So that caught my attention. And later in 1981, I did eventually go to Israel, and that's where I enrolled formally in yeshivot seminaries and learned the classical curriculum that's offered in yeshivot today. That's like a snapshot, I would say, the express line to my early childhood, to my rabbinical training.
And how about a feeling, a connection, not just with tradition, but at some point, was there a connection with God that you keyed into there?
I did have divine encounters, and one took place in 1969, before I was formally religious. And I was an idol worshiper because I worshiped the New York Mets. And I knew all the stats, and I read it in Newsweek. That's a Long Island paper. And I was just a kid and was all over that, a fourth grader. Did it for my school projects and loved Cleon Jones. Anyways, they were a bad team. And I was heartbroken. And I remembered clearly, I was in my father's car and he ran in to buy some nails for one of his projects and other building materials. And he asked me if I wanted to come, and I said no. And I gave forth a very fervent prayer. And I kid you not, that prayer was, God, please do miracles for the Mets. And then they went on. It was crazy, a winning streak, and they didn't lose any games. And then they won the World Series, and they said, what did they call them? The Miracle
Mets. Yeah. So did you call to tell them that you'd had a hand in?
No, they didn't pay very much in those days. I wanted to keep it this pure, but I was stunned.
What a thing when you're 9 years old, though.
It was the greatest thing they could imagine for a 9-year-old.
Yeah.
And that was real. I did ask for that miracle. And if you look in the history, that was an extraordinary year. And there were some things that happened out in the field that people are still puzzled how that happened, how ordinary players, decent but ordinary. Ron Swoboda caught that ball, and oh my God. In 1980, I wanted to be a violinist, but I wasn't good enough. And I auditioned at SUNY at Purchase, where I went to school, and I didn't get in. And I had an existential crisis. And I told God, I was angry because I worked so hard for it. And I said, God, if you do not show me a sign of what you want me to do with my life, you and I are finished. No more praying, no more relationship. I'm just going to conduct my life more or less as just, a humanitarian. I'll try to do good, but I'm not going to pray to you and sort of live with you. It was the way of students in SUNY at Purchase to hitchhike into New York, and there you could take the train or something. And so I was walking towards the exit, and this little rickety truck that took about 15 feet to, slide and stop. And then the guy said, "You want to ride?" And I saw that it was a milk truck. And I said, yeah, I'm a little worried about those brakes. And I get in, and he says, well, I'll take you down to the city, but I have one stop to make first. And I said, all right, you are the milkman after all. And that one stop was the yeshiva right there in Westchester County. And when we rolled in, a big Hasidic man came, burly man with his tzitziot, the fringes on the outside, central casting, fiddle on the roof, tevia. And he says, "Shalom." And I was just flabbergasted because I threatened God for a sign, or, otherwise we were finished. So this was another divine personal encounter that led me to believe that there is a God in this world. And this was the same God that led the New York Mets to be the Miracle Mets of 1969. And when I was going to go to Israel after my grandmother's death, I prayed and asked to find a connection with people. I was at that point at 21, not really thriving in America, in university, and really building up my courage to take a different path. And when I arrived, I had long hair down to my shoulders, and I wore blue suede shoes and washed out blue jeans. And I arrived through a taxi into the old city of Jerusalem, not realizing that it was a holiday, Simchat Torah, the day in which Jewish people celebrate the reading of the Torah. There were many different congregations singing loudly. So I had a big duffel bag, so I picked the closest one. And I went in, and they put my duffel bag to the side. And the children were dancing on the shoulders of adults while the Torah was parading around the synagogue. One little kid said to me, "Tarim oti, tarim oti," which I knew from his gestures meant lift me up too, lift me up too. After a while, his father came by, a British man, and said, "Maybe you'd like to have lunch with my wife and family afterwards." And I, of course, accepted his invitation. After our meal together and discussion, I excused myself to the bathroom. And when I walked towards the hall of the bathroom, there was a picture hanging on the wall, which was the picture of my grandmother and her two sisters. And this wife was the granddaughter of my grandmother's sister.
Wow.
We were second cousins.
That's an amazing connection.
So I went from praying to God for a miracle for the Mets, praying to God to show me a sign, and then praying to God to give me a connection. And God came through on all of these very fervent prayers. The takeaway is that when you pray, you have to pray with all of your heart. You have to pray with all of your life, like you really mean it. You have to really want it. And then somehow God shows up.
What wonderful experiences to have to ground you and prepare you for when difficult or challenging things come up in the future. I'd kind of like to explore for a minute what the love of God means to you or how you experience that. But maybe I could start by connecting it to how after those events in Sandy Hook, were there ways that you started to see what you might call the care of God or the love of God for those people who were left behind?
The one who loves most powerfully is most powerful. We are used to thinking, who's powerful? The president's powerful. The senator is powerful. The wealthy person is powerful. And the sages in the Talmud said when they went to heaven, they saw an upside-down world where the simple were the exalted and the exalted were the lowly. So the world appears to be running in a certain way, but it might be quite different than we really think. The simple person saying an earnest prayer from their heart might be the one that stops wars, might be the one that prevents somebody from committing suicide. It might be the one that encourages a person to do their physical therapy and renew their life and try to live again after an accident. So the power of love is the hidden light, not the light of the sun, but the Or Haganuz, the hidden light of before creation, And this stuff that holds it all together, through love, all things come to be. And when we love as God loves, then we cause things to be. And you'll never know what it is that you cause to be, because then that ruins the whole thing. Then there's no power to it, because there's no humility to it. So the greatest things that happen in the spiritual world are the things that people do and are not recognized for. For, I think, some very important work that will require our unity and our humility to put judgment outside in terms of doctrine and theology, and let love be the guide and the binding sinews that brings our hearts together. For something, I think we all believe something great will happen in our world, if not in this generation, in a future generation, and that we should come together and at least play our part in moving the world gently but persistently towards a place of loving kindness, and that when we are together, we will see a purpose to it all and will understand why this unity is crucial to reach to a higher level, to move from a place of war and strife and suffering, as we say, to go from strength to strength, but let us reach a place of redemption and just move higher and higher into that blessed world of redemption and light and closeness to God and one another.
Rabbi Dr. Shaul Praver, who was a first responder of the tragic Sandy Hook shooting. Ashton, thank you very much for bringing him to us. Boy, what an experience to have. And it's changed his life in many ways, of course, as it has the families who were directly impacted there. What did this make you think of as far as this whole idea of bad things happen in the world we live in?
Yes, I mean, it's been the central eternal question through so much of religious history, and it's always evolving. And his interview and the Surviving God interview as well just shows how much this question has evolved, but it will always be something that people can think about and can use to grow their faith.
I was really moved, actually, by him talking about the power of earnest prayer and that the one who loves most powerfully is the most powerful. Yeah. And I would think both in this Sandy Hook situation, Ashton, that you've brought us to, and with the book, Heather, that these two authors, these are people who have tapped into the love side of it to get through it. I mean, maybe that is the way you get through these things.
What I appreciate about these interviews, these are people who have kind of seen the worst thing. I think everyone's religious experience is valid and valuable, but I think for a long time we've heard people who seem above the fray, unaffected, tell us what to believe about God. And my faith is strengthened when I hear people who have been broken talk about how God healed them. And I'm just really grateful for those kinds of stories. They're what help heal me.
Yeah, when the rabbi says he has this moment where he had to ask a parent, do you believe you will see your child again?
Yeah.
Like, I want to know where you are before we start talking. And then the humility, I wrote down, when you realize you know nothing, then you begin to understand a little.
Yeah.
That's where we all are.
Yes.
We understand just a little in this world, but I'm going to leave with this image of him as a child having his grandmother arrive, the rabbi, for Shabbat dinner, lighting the candles, and his words were, she cast a spell, a spiritual spell in our home, and I knew whatever that was, I wanted that. Many thanks to Rabbi Dr. Shaul Praver for speaking with me. This episode was produced by Heather Bigley and Ashton Rowan. Our production team includes Leah King, Katarina Martinich, and Josh Orton. Our post-production sound designers are Mark Hansen, Daniel Phillips, and Carly Wilson. In Good Faith is committed to the idea that we all benefit from hearing people of widely varying backgrounds share their personal experience with faith and belief. In fact, we think people with such experience deserve some of our best listening. We'd love you to spread the word about In Good Faith. Any episode you listen to, you can easily share with a friend, and be sure and leave a comment or review at YouTube, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. Find us on Twitter at In Good Faith Pod, on Instagram and Facebook, In Good Faith Podcast. On YouTube, youtube.com/@in-good-faith. In Good Faith is a production of BYU Radio. I'm Stephen Cap Perry. I hope you'll join me again soon, right here in Good Faith.